think we're going to get started. We have the last of our panelists take her seat, so that's our cue. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and we will begin, like we begin everything at Bishop Walsh School, we'll begin in prayer. So if we can bow our heads. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity to be together tonight. Thank you to these panelists. Thank you for their gifts. Thank you for this chance to share their successes. And we ask that you please be with family and especially students who continue to struggle in school, and give them strength and give them hope. We ask this in your name. Amen. Amen. So this is an evening of happiness and of celebration. This is not an evening to lecture. It's Dyslexia Awareness Month, and we have some panelists that want to share some of their successes, but I thought they have had their years of having tests, so it's your turn. You all have a test in front of you. So we're going to turn the tables a little bit, and we're just going to start the first couple of minutes with your dyslexia test. So this will not be collected. So your first question, you just answer circle true or false. You have to wait until students struggle with reading before identifying dyslexia. True or false? Dan White, will you? Yay to those of you who said false. The good news is you do not have to wait until a student is struggling. We can identify the risk factors for students with dyslexia as early as kindergarten and sometimes even earlier. So we can get into the wheres and whys of that, but that is great news. Number two, not many students have dyslexia. True or false? Okay, so your answer, the big reveal. False. The current estimates are anywhere from 15 to 20% of people have dyslexia, either mild, moderate, or severe. So chances are they're in every classroom. And that is good news. As you will learn, they're very creative, successful people. Number three, dyslexia means reversing letters and seeing things backwards. True or false? Okay, let's look. That is false. Dyslexia is a language-based learning difference that usually involves phonology, which means sounds. The ability to play with sounds when you're a little kid, to do nursery rhymes and clap your syllables, to be able to see the letters and know what sounds they make. That's the primary cause of dyslexia, although most people think it's reversing. It is not. Number four, students with dyslexia are lazy. They just need to try harder. I think most of you know this answer. I think most of you know this answer.
I got that one right.
That is definitely false. Dyslexics are extremely hard workers. They're the hardest working kids in the school. And they're also very creative and out-of-the-box thinkers, as you will soon learn. And number five, most teachers are trained to detect dyslexia.
False.
True or false?
Definite false.
So at this time, that is false, because most teacher preparation programs programs do not include it in teacher coursework. We are hoping that that will change. This year, Maryland got a law, the dyslexia law, that requires us to screen for dyslexia. So the colleges will get on board. We might have to fuss a little, but they'll get on board. And we are going to save the bonus question till the end. And I'm not going to take much of your time because I know this is who you came to see. But I am Stephanie Pratt. I am director of the Pratt program here at Bishop Walsh School. And we are a pre-K through 12 program for students with dyslexia and ADHD. And I have some wonderful colleagues that I just want to briefly introduce. Jill Denola. Jill, wave to everybody. And Kathy Kay. And my good friend and colleague, Kathy Levitas, who will be our moderator for our panel discussion. So, thanks, Kathy.
So we are really blessed to have a wonderful group of people who have been so kind and brave tonight to come out and be on our panel because they're the experts. And I'm going to introduce each person, but I'm going to ask them just to give you a little bit of an overview of just who they are, what grade they're in, if they're still in school, maybe why they're here, because we have lots of questions we want to ask them. So I'm going to pass the microphone down. This is Dr. Sue Newber, who many of you may know.
Hi, I was invited tonight primarily because both of my daughters are dyslexic, and it was really through Stephanie's help that we identified my oldest daughter, who was actually in 10th grade. And one day she said to me, "Mom, I'm a lot smarter than people think I am." And it just so happened, I don't know if Stephanie remembers this, but it just so happened that she called me about a question that was actually intended for somebody else in my office. And we had a very long conversation. I think it ended up being about an hour-long conversation. And she, and after we were done talking, she directed me to the International Dyslexia Association website, and I read more information and got Sarah, started in some services at that point. So that's why I'm here.
This is Marley Rico.
Hi, I'm Marley. I'm a junior at East Stroudsburg University, and I am majoring in nursing and minoring in nutrition. I'm here today because I wanted to advocate how well the Pratt program helped me overcome my dyslexia, and I think it's really important, especially in college.
And Jordan Marini.
Hi everyone, I am a senior here at Bishop Walsh, and I'm here because I'm dyslexic. You couldn't tell by the shirt. Miss Pratt has taught me how to read and write and pretty much everything. She's basically my second mom, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for her. So if I have to speak at a panel, that's what I'll do.
And Caden Kramer.
Hello, I'm Caden Kramer. I'm in 8th grade, so last year of middle school. Obviously, I go to Bishop Walsh here, and I don't know why I wouldn't. I wanted to come here to speak about the Pratt program because I've had a lot of hardships with reading and even learning the ABCs when I was in kindergarten. And I think everybody should understand what Pratt students go through and many other things.
This is Roman Taylor.
Hi everyone, Roman Taylor, I'm 22. I own a business where we sell pet reptiles like geckos and snakes. I went to school here, I went through the entire Pratt program, and it's just been such a great help, so I want to tell all of you guys about it and how good it is.
We have a dynamic duo here. We have Neela and Al Navarrete.
Hello, I am Neela Navarrete, and I am in 5th grade. I've been doing the Pratt program for 6 years.
Hi, good evening everyone. My name is Al Navarrete. I'm the parent of Neela. I got 2 more kids who are here in Bishop Walsh, Sam and Levi over there. So I'm here to share some of our experiences as parents of 2 kids who have dyslexia.
So we want to talk about strengths and talents, because as Steph said, this is a night of celebrating and seeing what's good about dyslexia, because we always focus on what's not good about dyslexia, but there's a lot that's good. So I have some specific questions. We're going to just pass the microphone back and forth. I want to ask our our elementary and middle school students, Neela and Caden, what are you guys good at? And I'm just going to pass it to Neela first.
I'm good at guitar playing, also word searches, and I notice people who need help, and I help them. And I was really surprised, and I was really surprised on standardized testing that I was really good on the shapes test.
And Caden, how about you?
I am good at speaking and I'm good at language arts, surprisingly. And then I am also good at coding for computers and games and stuff. And I play a lot of video games while I'm at it.
So we have some high school and college students too, and I want to know, how has your dyslexia helped you? So Jordan?
Well, I think it's made me a lot stronger of a person. I grew up with two older sisters who got A's on everything under the sun. They both played instruments. I'm not musically talented. They didn't have to study and they got perfect grades. I came here in 6th grade and I was embarrassed every time I was taken out of the classroom to get extra time or to get something read to me. And then I would come back in and, peers would say, well, where were you? And I was like, oh, I got extra time. And they're like, well, why? Oh, I'm dyslexic. Well, that's not fair. That's not fair. Try my hand dyslexic. That's not fair. And, it's being dyslexic, that's not even the hardest part. It's dealing with people that don't know what it is. Because it's like they think you have an advantage on them. They think that, you get extra time and they don't, or you get something read to you and they don't. They just don't understand how hard it is and what you go through every day. And then when they make you feel bad about it, it's just so much worse. So it's just definitely made me a lot stronger, and I've been able to brush a lot of things off a lot easier.
Molly, how about you in college?
Well, for me, college was a big turning point because I went from having the Pratt program and Miss Stanola into this big, scary adult world where there isn't really as much help for that. And the biggest thing for me was when I went to college, there wasn't really as much resources because they told me I wasn't dyslexic enough, which is hard because you can't really define how dyslexic someone is. So in college, it was a lot harder for me, but it also gave me a lot of confidence because I went up and I talked to professors and, I advocated for myself. And so I made sure that I was doing what I needed to do. And so advocating for myself really made me more confident and strong and made me feel comfortable in what I was doing. And even though nursing is definitely one of those harder majors to deal with, my dyslexia made me work harder for that goal that I wanted. So I think it has given me more confidence and more dependence, in my opinion.
So we have these students that you've heard from, but we also have some people that we're going to call adults, even though there are some near adults here. So Roman and Al are in the real world working, and I want to ask you guys, how has dyslexia helped you in your adult life? And what do you think your superpower is or your strength is because of dyslexia? Roman?
In my adult life, well, so with dyslexia, it kind of makes you more creative, at least, when it's hard to, so there's a lot of things that go into success, but when you try to pinpoint what part of dyslexia helped you, I would say creativity, just being able to think through things and figure new things out, that has to be one of the best things. Especially in business, there's so many just, let's call them fires to put out, issues that come up, and just coming up with creative ways to solve them, things like that, just it really helps a lot.
What's your strength? What's your superpower?
Strength. Well, I would say some form of creativity or just being able to figure things out and get through obstacles like that.
Al, how about you? How has it helped you in your adult life? What's your superpower or your strength?
So superpower, I would say I could freeze time. And I think I could do that through photography. So I'm in the business of photography. Again, it unleashes the creative side. How dyslexia helps me, I think one thing is realizing that you have to be patient, more patient with yourself, more patient with your kids. And I think it's realizing that you have to spend more time doing things that other people can do quickly. So I guess that's one superpower I realized, that back then you would see that some kids just get things fast and you just have to work double hard to where you want to be.
This is an open, oh, Sue, sorry.
I have to answer for Sarah.
Okay.
So my daughter was at the last moment was unable to attend tonight, and I wish I could find a pink wig because she has just incredible pink hair, and that's all part of Sarah's personality. But she wanted me to say what her superpower was, and she said that through elementary up through high school, and I'm sure even into college, that she was often teased and ridiculed because of her dyslexia. People often think you're not smart. And she said that being in that position has made her accepting of other people. She really is the least judgmental, one of the least judgmental people I know. And she's very accepting. She feels that that's her superpower. But as her mom, I can also say that she's incredibly creative. She's a talented photographer, and she started her own business in Northern Virginia, which is not an easy place to start a business. And she's been so successful that this week she actually had a post on her website that she's not accepting any new clients. But she said that one of the things she wants the young children to know is that you need to own it. And she said you have to be okay with it. You have to own it. And she said if you laugh at yourself first before other people laugh at you, then they're not going to say anything, because it's no fun to make fun of people who are already laughing at themselves. And she said that she draws a lot of humor from her dyslexia. And that's really how she's learned to deal with it as an adult. So
This is sort of an open question for anybody on the panel who wants to think back and answer this, but can you think about before you knew you had dyslexia, or you were diagnosed, let's put it that way. What was it like? How did you feel? What were you thinking before people said, something's going on here? Does anybody feel comfortable speaking? Marley?
So I wasn't aware that I had dyslexia up until 5th or 6th grade, but my parents were aware, and they didn't want me to feel uncomfortable knowing that I had that, and made me feel like I was different. And even though they tried their hardest, I still felt that way. When I was very young, I would be taken out of the classroom sometimes because I couldn't read as fast as the other kids, and I would get confused because they were reading so fast, and I was going, what's wrong with me? Why can't I read as fast? Why can't I say these words as fast? Or why can't I say these words like this? And sometimes, the kids would notice it to a point that they would be like, hey Marley, read this. And they would make fun of me, and they would call me like slow-mo because I wouldn't read it as fast. Because I was taught to read things slowly to process things better. Also, when you're dyslexic and you're younger, one thing that one of my teachers did with me that made me really realize that I had dyslexia was about in 4th grade. She told me to take a book, and I had a black pen, a Sharpie, and she went, I want you to cross out anything you don't understand. And at that age, it really hit me because there was only a few words that were left in that one page that had not been crossed out. And then that's when I realized that I was different, but in a way that was not bad, but that I learned differently. And that's what my parents made sure that they taught me was, you are not smart. You are not capable like everybody else. You learn and process things differently than everybody else, but that does not mean that you are incapable. So for me, for the longest time, it was learning that I was just as capable as everybody else.
Does anybody else want to answer? Okay. Jordan?
So I was diagnosed in 1st grade. There's not a whole lot I remember, but I do remember being in kindergarten, and all these other little kids are running around reading their books, and I was like, man, how do you know the words on those pages? And I was so confused, but picked up a book. There were pictures in it. I made up my own story, so it was way more interesting that way. And now stories were way better.
Katie?
So I was in kindergarten. I don't remember much of it, but I do remember how much it was a struggle for me to learn my ABCs. I couldn't rhyme right. I do a lot of the things that a normal kindergartner could do. I mean, I knew my name and I knew how to speak. That was the basics. That's what kind of made me realize there was something a little off. And then when I got diagnosed with dyslexia, everything started going up because it was early, so we were able to catch on to it and help me way faster than anything else. So.
Anybody else? Roman?
If I remember correctly, I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade by the time I got diagnosed with it. I thought it was a disease at first, so I was told that's we're okay with that. But I remember doing spelling tests, 2nd, 3rd grade, with horrific scores, like 13%. I couldn't even finish those tests because the way they set these up, teacher stood up, said a word, repeated it, moved on to the next one after 10 seconds. I got none of them right, and the real issue was just, I remember the feeling of how bad I felt about it, and the way the teacher made me feel about this, because she didn't know what the issue was. She just thought either I didn't try or what happened, so, that's the biggest memory I have, just feeling like, either you're stupid or you just couldn't do it. So being diagnosed with it after that was a big relief.
Anybody else?
So, believe it or not, I only realized that I had dyslexia 3 months ago when I attended the Orton Gillingham training. So this was a training program with Pratt. It was a 60-hour training for the teachers. And I attended it excuse me. I attended it because I was trying to teach my kids and see how the lessons are being made. And so I realized that I have stealth dyslexia. So it's like, I thought if you didn't, my older brother had it, and I thought if you didn't flip the letters, then you're fine. But it's not. So just like what Stephanie said, it's a phonetic dysfunction. Thank you.
I have a question for the kids, and then I have a question for the parents, which would be Sue and Al. So all of you, and I'm sorry if our microphone's going in and out, all of you sitting here at the table at some point in time had a teacher, a parent, some teachers who realized that you had dyslexia and they figured out what they needed to do to help you. But I want to know, what did you think was the most helpful thing that you experienced once you got the kind of help that you needed? And this is, again, this is an open question. Anybody who feels comfortable answering? Okay, Jordan?
I would definitely say one-on-one help with Steph. I do not like learning in big classrooms because, again, you feel stupid. Like, if you ask a question, it's like, oh, is that common sense? Should I know that? And then, you're in front of your so-called friends who would laugh at you if, you ask and it's just a dumb question, which most of the time, oh God, what's 7 times 8? You just kind of forget. But when you're with her, it's just like, she doesn't make you feel stupid. She knows how to help you, and she makes you feel smart. Like, she can tell you in a way that you just magically get, and it's just the most incredible feeling when it finally clicks, because you can sit in a classroom and it just does not click, and it clicks for everybody else, and you're just watching them understand it, and you see them getting their tests back, and they're getting hundreds, and like Roman said, I will never forget the first thing I failed. I was in 3rd grade, and it was a spelling test, and I saw it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got an F. My parents are going to be so mad at me. I got an F. I've never gotten an F. Spelling, there's autocorrect, who needs it? But, I mean, it's just like being with her, you don't feel dumb, and nobody should feel dumb. And
mother, Miss Pratt, and my kindergarten teacher, Miss Keenley. She has passed away, but she was a very nice woman, and she was the one that found out I had dyslexia when she noticed I couldn't rhyme whatsoever. Simple things I couldn't even do. But it was just one of those things. My mother, she's helped me along the way completely once she found out I had dyslexia. She's helped me with so many things, figuring out my multiplication tables, all sorts of stuff. If she would just wave, she's in the back over there. She's over yonder. And then Miss Pratt has obviously helped me through it all. She's taught me a lot of things and how to, properly read words and figure out words I don't know by using the roots and the suffixes and prefixes to really understand them and to connect all the dots there. Sometimes that's not easy, but especially French words. But overall, those are the people who have really helped me through it all and through everything that's happened and all the bad grades I've gotten and are still getting sometimes. But that's pretty much all I have to say there.
Marla?
I have a few people. So my mom and dad, were the first people. They've always been people in my life who were there for me constantly. My dad grew up with dyslexia and did not know it or realize it until he was in college. Whenever I was in, kindergarten, and he kind of put two and two together, and he felt awful because he was like, Lisa, to my mom, like, she has dyslexia like me, and this is my fault. And my mom was like, no, it's not your fault, and we're going to help her. So they were a huge part in supporting me and making me feel like I was not different and I was not left out, even though family members would be like, oh, how's her reading program going? And my parents would be like, she's doing great. And then I would be like, what are you talking about? What reading program? And, they always made me feel like I wasn't different or that I wasn't weird, and that was a big thing for them. But then when I started noticing that, I am different, I came to Bishop Walsh when I was in 9th grade, and I started working with Mrs. Denola when I was in my sophomore year. And I, over time, worked with her consistently with hands-on things, just like Jordan said. And I went pretty much from a very, very low reading level, below high school reading level at a high school, which I was. And by the time I graduated, over time working with her, I was at the correct reading level I was at. And if it wasn't for Mrs. Denola, I wouldn't be where I was today. I wouldn't be able to be in nursing school if I didn't constantly sit with her for hours working on my spelling and working on reading. Because before that, I could barely read like a 6th grader, and so without Mrs. Denola, I wouldn't be here.
Anybody else?
I can't speak for my daughter, but I can tell you a few things that, I mentioned this at the beginning, that both of my daughters are dyslexic, and they have spent a lot of hours with these two wonderful teachers up here. In fact, Kathy Levitas would get up we'd meet with her at 6:30 in the morning, 3 days a week for at least a year. And Stephanie also tutored my oldest daughter. We've had other tutors throughout the years as well, but I know they benefited greatly. In fact, Sarah, as an adult, would sometimes say to me, I wish I could spend more time with Stephanie. I'm struggling again. So, but the other thing that Sarah told me, well, first of all, she said she hates the Scantron. I don't know if we still use Scantron in this building or not, but she said if you want to torture a dyslexic, give them a test using a Scantron. So she thinks that Scantron should be eliminated, and she wanted me to start a chant. Forget the Scantron, but you don't have to chant it. I don't know if they use them at all anymore, but you'd have to understand Sarah would have been much better presenting this information than I. She did tell me, though, about a biology professor in college that she wanted me to share with everybody. She said this professor asked at the beginning of the class, so she was an art major, so biology was just a required class, and it was like one of the lower level biology science. It was just a required science class. And the teacher asked that each student to fill out an index card if they had a particular learning disability or any diagnosis that could affect their learning. And Sarah filled out the card saying that she has ADHD and dyslexia. And the teacher spoke to her after class and said, I want you to know that I'm going to prepare your exams a little differently. So this is what she did. She prepared the exams in a larger font. She allowed Sarah to answer the questions on the exam and did not make her fill out the double Scantron. And she also, when the exam, I think she also gave Sarah fewer multiple choice answers. Like instead of 5, I think she gave her 3. But what she also did was that during the exam, she would ask Sarah to take a seat at the back of the class in any row. She said just sit in the back. And the reason she did that is because nobody could look over her shoulder and see that she had a larger font exam and see that she was not completing it on the Scantron. So her teacher would grade her exam on the paper and then enter it in on the Scantron herself. And this was just a simple class. It was not part of her required curriculum. It was a general ed class that she took, and she'll never forget that biology teacher because of what she did for her. So something as simple as that can make a really big difference in a student. She had to do Scantrons a lot when she was a 5th grader at St. John Newman, and it was really torturous for her.
This is the second part of this question, and it's more for Al and Sue, who are parents of kids with dyslexia. Your kids are getting or did get Orton Gillingham intervention. What are your hopes for your children, as they're going through the program or as they are out, being launched into the world? Sue, do you want me to start with you? I can go down to Al.
So again, my hope is obviously that they are comfortable in their own skin and that they're independent, but that they also, as Sarah said, that they own their differences. And what Marley was saying earlier, is that one of the biggest things that you need to do as a parent, in the early years, you're going to be doing a lot of the advocating for them, and you're going to be really working hard to get the services that they need, and to also help people understand that they are bright kids and they're very creative. Sarah said many times people were always surprised when she came up with a really good answer because they didn't expect that from her, unfortunately. But anyhow, teaching your child to advocate for themselves, especially when they get to college, and both of my girls were very good at that. Danielle is currently at Frostburg State, and she will meet with all of her teachers, and she will sit down and talk with them, and oftentimes her teachers will come up with suggestions on how she can perhaps study better for an exam. And really, your job is going to be, you're the advocate early on, but you have to let them learn how to do that when they get to college or their jobs, if they choose not to go to college. And I think the other thing, I would just say this to parents, please do not, and I'm preaching to the choir, so I know that you already don't do this, but you need to also share this information with your relatives and grandparents. We cannot judge our kids by their grades. Our kids are not their grades. There's so much more to them, and I knew that I grew up in a household in which you got so much money. In fact, I found my 2nd grade report card, and I saw the amount of money that I got for each grade. It was written on the side. I will also tell you that conduct was my lowest grade because I always talked too much. So my conduct was poor, but anyhow, I could see that I think I got a quarter for every B and 50 cents for an A or something like that. So I grew up in a household that really emphasized grades. And that's how I parented in the beginning until I realized that it was really destroying my kids and their self-esteem. So we can't get upset with a C or a D and sometimes an occasional F because they really are trying their hardest.
Thank you. Al, you have kids who are still in, elementary school, going through the Pratt program, or maybe starting in. What are your hopes for them as they continue?
I just like that the Pratt program gives them a safe environment for them to express themselves and let them know that dyslexia doesn't define them. And in their lessons they're given, they take a break from spellings and just let them express what they want to say and just, brainstorm ideas and find creative ways to learn. And I think that's, my hope is that, 2 of them would continue to enjoy what the Pratt program is offering them. And the Pratt program made us decide why, Bishop Walsh is a good school for them, specifically just because they have these programs that they offer.
So one of the things we do in the Pratt program is we provide accommodations and just different things that we do for our kids who are in the Pratt program. Things like larger font, maybe fewer multiple choice questions, more time on tests, taking tests out of the classroom, having a reader. For our middle school, high school, and college students, are there things that you still struggle with, and how do you get around this stuff? I'm sure there are, but how do you get around the times when you're just sort of stuck in spite of accommodations? Anybody want to start? Okay, how about, let's start here.
All right, I get started here, that's nice. I have problems with writing. I get ahead of myself when I'm thinking, and I tend to just lose track of where I am, skip a lot of words, and do all sorts of stuff. So most of the time I'll dictate to a computer if it's really long and voice type it, and I usually get longer than I need to be on those because that's just something I've been used to, being able to talk it and speak about it and really express what I'm thinking to try to get my answers right as possible. And some other things I've had problems with are studying. I have to move a lot when I study. I can't really think without that and stuff like that. And I also have to get around just learning in general. Sometimes I lose train of thought on like things, trying to really figure out what I'm sitting there looking at, and I'll start like, really tapping my foot or something, my classmates' nerves. That's something. But I do that. I try to, stay really focused by like fidgeting with a pencil or something in my hand, and do that type of stuff, fidgeting, using technology, because that's something I'm well versed in, and all sorts of stuff like that.
So I can read pretty fluently now. I could not back in first grade. I couldn't read the words off the pages. But once I got to probably around like 5th grade, I could kind of read, I guess you could say normally, and I would sound like the kids in my class. But let me tell you, I could read that page 3 times in a row, and I could maybe tell you the character's name. Could not tell you what they were doing, could not tell you what they were thinking, could not tell you the main idea of the page until the 4th time where I read it with Steph. And I mean, I don't know, it's not even because I wasn't interested in it, it was just like I was so focused on trying to read the words so that I wouldn't sound stupid in front of my classmates that I wouldn't know how to answer the questions because, I'm trying just to get the words off the page, and then, comprehension's still not my thing. Writing isn't as bad, but, I don't love to read because I'm not great at it, so my vocabulary is not super high. So it's still pretty difficult, but we're getting there.
Molly? So in college, it's a lot of writing, and I am a person who loves writing, but then after I write, I really have to read what I wrote, because there can be a lot of, it looks like I was drunk when I wrote it. It's basically the best way to summarize it. So that's the thing for me, is I just go and I type, and then I look back and then I go, I know what I was trying to say, but if anybody else tries to read that, they're not going to know what I was talking about. So the big important thing for me is, another thing I used that Kane mentioned was talking into, a device, trying to get out what you're trying to say because it's verbal, and then it's written on the page for you. Another big thing is my college offers kind of like a writing studio, and so you can go and you can sit with a professional English major who's a senior or junior in their final years, and they'll go over the paper with you. And for me, that's been a tremendous help, because after I've gone through and rewritten things, they, also advocate, I know what you're trying to say here, and maybe it would be better if you did this, because then it comes across everybody else is better, even though your ideas are the same. Another big thing for me is time tests. So in college, I'm not technically dyslexic enough to have set times, but if you talk to your professors and people, I have one amazing nutrition professor who tells me, go sit in a room, I trust you, I know you're gonna do what you need to do, but when you're writing out huge care plans and these long, estimated questions of things, and they're trying to give me a set time, I'm sorry, my brain cannot move that fast. So for me, a big thing is finding the time to take that quick moment and be like, I know what I need to summarize, and this is what I need to write, because timing for me is one of those big things that I've always struggled with. Al and Roman, I wanted to ask you, what do you wish had been done differently for you before you got into the program that you got into? And Al, it sounds like you never really did, but Roman, any thoughts, or do you want me to move on to Al?
Well, I was pretty young, so before we started in the prep program, I think it was around 4th grade, but I would say the main thing that I just wish would have happened is to get diagnosed earlier, just to know what's going on, and so from kindergarten, 3rd grade, to not have to go through that. I would have been way more ahead, who knows where that would have gone with getting into the advanced classes. I believe there's two classes in each grade, if I remember correctly, and I don't think I was ever in the advanced one. A lot of that is just, I couldn't really read that well, I can't write at all. I can now, but because I went through the program, but back then it was really, really difficult. So the main thing is just just having all the teachers around know what the issue is, that would have been huge. And as far as I remember, all the teachers, they didn't know. It was only Miss Pratt. I went somewhere, I think in Pittsburgh, to get diagnosed, and another person helped me with that. And then when I came back, she sort of took care of everything else. I was in the program until my senior year or whenever I graduated it. And I feel like at this point I can read as well as anyone else. Writing's a little tricky. I mean, it's probably not the college level, like professionally written out, but as far as everything else goes, I feel really confident. And if you could just get in the program as early as possible, that's the best thing to do.
And Al, how about you? What do you wish had been done differently for you as a student, growing up?
So looking back during my high school years, I always thought that I could just be an average student my whole life. But there was this one time during my senior year, so we always have standardized tests, and all your grades mattered with how you performed in your test. And during my senior year, I got the Best in Science award, and that's because one of the science subject had a thesis project, and that's when I performed well. So I was able to top my class just for the science. So that made me realize that you could compensate, and if you work hard for something, you could still be better than average. So to that question, I guess back then I would wish that there were more projects for dyslexics, if that could be a special accommodation. And looking back, I remember that when taking the test, I was one of the last kid always doing the exam. So that was really a struggle. So I guess those 2 points, more projects, would have been better for us, because that, the standard test types really doesn't work well for us. And the time, giving accommodation on time on test is something that I would have wished that was done. Yep.
Can I comment to this? Just on Sarah's behalf. A couple of things that my daughter commented about on this question. Number one, please don't ever make me read aloud again. Unless I've read that passage before, please don't make these kids read unless they've been prepared ahead of time. My youngest daughter loved to read in class, and so her reading teacher, when she was at Braddock, would give us the assignment the weekend before, and we would go home and we would read the test together a couple of times, or not the test, I'm sorry, the passage, whatever story she was reading in her reading book, and then she would feel comfortable reading in front of the class. The other thing that I have a problem with, or that I wish we could change some in the classrooms, is not having the kids transcribe their homework, and we may not do that here, but in the public schools they still do. And I know my youngest daughter would be transcribing from the board the information for homework, and the teacher would start lecturing. And I was constantly getting comments from her teachers saying she's not paying attention. Well, she told me she was still trying to write the homework down, and so she couldn't transcribe fast enough, because we know that children with dyslexia can't transcribe from the board of their paper very easily. It takes probably 2 or 3 times longer. And lastly, Sarah would like to advocate for having sign language as a substitution to foreign language. Both of my girls love sign language, and they think that it should be an option as a foreign language credit in the school system. So it's something to think about.
So you touched on the idea, or Sarah did, about advocating, self-advocation or advocacy. And I wanted to talk with our high school and college students, Jordan and Marley. Do you think advocating for yourself is important, and how have you learned to do that, and how do you do that? Marley.
So for me, whenever I first applied for college, I was really excited. I got into nursing, but then immediately my mom and I were like, we need to look for accommodations for my dyslexia. So we wrote them a letter and, sent in everything that we thought we needed. I even had Ms. Pratt write a letter. And then they came back and they told me that I was not dyslexic enough and I did not deserve accommodations. So basically at that time, I was kind of panicked and I didn't know what to do. And there's this amazing thing called a reading pen, and they also have exam pens for these. And what it does is You take the pen and you highlight the word that you want to read or the sentence, and it speaks to you, or you can put headphones in and it reads to you. So for me, that was a huge thing. So I went to every single one of my teachers the first week of school, and I had a note that said I was allowed to use the reader pen, and they all were more than fine with it. I had one or two, once I got into my nursing clinicals, they were like, how do I know you're not cheating? And then they researched it and went, you know what, this is fine. But that was a huge part, was I had a lot of teachers telling me, you know, I don't really think you need this, or you know, you really should learn to get off of this. And I would look at them and I would say, listen, everyone learns differently, and this is how I learn. I use this pen for everything. I use it for when I study in the library. People probably look at me weird, but I love it, and it has made my life so much better. And while self-advocating for myself, I have definitely gained more confidence, like I said. So now it's easy for me to go to professors and easy for me to talk about with people because it's something that I am proud of, and it's not a crutch that I use, it's my strength. Jordan?
So when you're in elementary and middle school, your parents are doing all of your advocating for you. So I recommend once you hit high school or your child hits high school that they start doing it for themselves. I was in freshman year, and teachers are aware of dyslexia here, but they don't all know how to help you or how it affects you. So I recommend you be very straightforward with them. You don't have to be rude, but I recommend being assertive so they get it. You know, I need extra time. I need a reader. I need to be in a quiet room. I can't have somebody clicking a pencil in the back of my head making a noise. I can't have somebody throwing a paper down and picking it up, because I can guarantee you that's what I'm going to be looking at. So, you know, you just have to be honest. If I didn't get a word bank from one of my, it is a specific teacher, and he would never give me a word bank. It was always in my accommodations, and he did not give it to me. So I marched right back in there, and I was like, word bank. He always gave it to me. Okay, I didn't snap, but, you know. I mean, I could have, but he might have taken a few points off. But you just have to, own it. You can't be embarrassed about it. You can't be shy about it. Just be like, hey, I need extra time, and all my peers have gotten over it, or they're just tired of listening to me talk about it. Either way, they don't bring it up anymore, so. Oh, and if anybody picks on your child for being dyslexic, you tell me where they live. I just want to talk.
All right, so we have a panel of experts here, and the last question I have, and it's really for everybody, is what advice do you have? And I want to start with Neela and Caden. So Neela, can you think about what your advice would be for somebody who's maybe new to the Pratt program or coming into Bishop Walsh and just starting the Pratt program? What advice would you give that elementary student? I'm going to hand you that.
I would say it is helpful because I get to practice all my sounds in a mirror, and I get to work on my sentences and paragraphs.
Okay, what advice for a middle school student maybe just starting into the Pratt program here?
Well, obviously, a middle school student would be less willing to work with a Pratt teacher and stuff. They wouldn't really want to tell them everything that's happening and all sorts of stuff because they're not used to it. They don't have somebody, they might have come somewhere from where they didn't have that. So they wouldn't be used to it exactly. And they wouldn't really fully explain what's going on, or maybe they just wouldn't be trying what they're trying to tell them to do. So I would recommend that they would do that and do everything they possibly can that the Pratt program person tells them. And if it doesn't work for them, they can always just tell them that and they'll figure something else out.
And Marley and Jordan, how about like study tips that you can, offer advice for people trying to figure out how to finish high school, get into college, get through college?
So I'm going to be a little hypocritical here. I recommend staying organized. At the beginning of the year, all my folders and notebooks match. Now I'm lucky if I bring the right ones to class. I don't use a planner. Well, okay, to be fair, I got one this year, but it was for January of 2020. So I will have a very organized second semester, but not mine too. So, well, my parents are mine too. But I also recommend, if you're reading something, break it down by paragraphs and try being the keyword. I recommend using this at, but try and get the main point and put it on a sticky note and just keep it there. So when you go back to review for either a section quiz or a chapter test, you just have it. And you don't have to reread the whole paragraph because you're not going to understand what it is anyway. So just try and have that main point. The other thing, you're probably not going to be too fond of this answer, but just know some intelligent friends. I'm not saying to cheat off of them, I'm not saying to copy them, but especially in my math class, I learn better from a peer. It doesn't help me to listen to somebody who is highly intelligent, talk, and example problem, and another example. I don't get what you're saying. Like, you're way too intelligent for me to be able to understand that. So if I watch a friend do it, I'm like, oh, I can kind of pick up on it a little bit easier than if I'm just watching this rocket scientist do it in front of me, because I don't know the words you're using. I don't know how your brain works. I mean, I can tell you're smart and I can tell you know what you're doing, but I'm not going to figure it out. So choose your friends wisely.
For me, leaving high school, you know, big thing was I always had a planner. I was always organized. I always made sure I knew what I had to do. And that was very helpful going into college, because whenever people used to tell me, you know, college is very different than high school, I didn't think so until I hit that, like, second week of, like, hi, you have 3 exams and 4 research projects. And I was just like, oh, lovely, this is what a planner is for. So I immediately looked out and used the resources at my college. There's tutoring, you know, peers, you know. Most of the colleges have like GAs or graduate students for that class that you can sit down and talk with. There are a lot of professors, most professors, who are willing to sit down and talk with you about things. I've had very few, 1 or 2 that have been rude or don't believe in dyslexia or think, you know, oh, you don't really need this, you're just trying to, you know, get around the tests, which was a huge thing for me, you know. So finding out your resources before you go into college and finding out what your school offers is huge, because if you have a school that doesn't really, you know, advocate for dyslexia or handles dyslexia well, then you probably want to find some ways around that, which is a great thing about what the Reader Pen does, is most schools have to let you use it. You don't need a specific form of saying how dyslexic you are, because all it does is it reads to you. And most schools will say that it accommodates. So I would say also as well, if you have to write papers, see if there's writing centers at the colleges, or see what else they offer with help as that as well. And Roman and Al, as business people, and people who have dyslexia, do you have any advice for people who are in business and are dyslexic, just ways to kind of deal with both and be successful?
Well, okay, so in business, you write a lot of emails and things like that. I think someone mentioned spell check is very helpful, so you get past the spelling with that. Occasionally, you just have to Google some words, but other than that, I mean, just, you know, not using dyslexia as a negative thing, trying to stay positive about it, use the good parts of dyslexia. You know, the negative parts, especially in business, honestly, I haven't really come across anything that has held me up because of dyslexia. If anything, it's helped tremendously. Like I said, the only thing would be spelling, and that's pretty minor. It's easy to avoid that. We've been in business for 3.5 years right now, or as of now. I haven't come across anything that I've been hindered by because of dyslexia, so I'm pretty happy about that. I would say, you know, like anyone that has it and is looking into what happens after you graduate, when you get into the real world, let's say, try not to be so worried. It's not going to hinder you that much, and I think everyone with it will be very successful if they just apply themselves and just, you know, work hard and do the job.
Al, how about you?
Just like what Jordan said, finding a friend or a life partner to help you with dyslexia helps a lot. So when I realized I had, you know, something wrong with my reading or spelling, realizing your weakness during my adult life, I knew that, you know what, I need to find someone smart to help me with this. I married a doctor. So it helped me through, you know, every time I write something, I would just write it down and I would ask her to proofread it. every time I have to post something on Facebook, I have to let her check it because I really mess things up. So I guess knowing your weakness, it makes you realize what you need and what help you need. So sometimes, yeah, admitting your weakness and knowing your weakness helps a lot.
And Sue, I don't know whether Sarah has any, thing that she said about that, but also just your advice as a parent.
First of all, on Sarah's behalf, as she said before, she just encourages everybody to own it and to realize that your mistakes, she said to own your mistakes and just laugh at yourself. And she also works very hard at educating people about what dyslexia is, because she'll tell people, especially if she makes a mistake or something, that she is dyslexic. But she also gets a little bit frustrated when people jokingly say if they make a mistake or if they perhaps see something backwards and they say, oh, I'm dyslexic, and Sarah will actually make a comment about what dyslexia really is. She told me a story just yesterday that she was with one of her friends, and they were talking about a TV show, and she was trying to explain to her friend just how her dyslexic brain works, was the story she told me. And she was talking about a character in the show, and she couldn't come up with his name, and she kept calling him Franklin. And I guess there was a gentleman at the bar or bartender or some restaurant they were in, and he said, no, his name is Ben. And she had put together, like in her brain, she was thinking, she could only think of Franklin, so it was not Ben Franklin, but that was the association her brain was making. And I guess what I really want to say to parents is that I lived for years with incredible worry and anxiety, and your kids are going to be okay. I know you worry about them a lot, but they will be okay. They will find their niche. Many of you don't know me here, but I went to medical school, and I'm a scientist, and I love math, and my daughter wanted to go to become an art major, and I just about died when she said I'm going to be an art major. And it was hard at first, I'm not going to lie, but I had to trust her, and she has, she lives completely independently in Northern Virginia on a photographer's income, and that's because she works super hard, and she's good at what she does, and people like her because of her personality. She's very creative. The other thing I would like to say, in sort of segue into this, we've been talking about art majors, is that there is nothing wrong with your kids going to trade schools. And my feeling is that we are going to be in desperate need of electricians and masons and people who are in construction. Those fields are really, they're really, really struggling. So if your son or daughter wants to go to a trade school, I would fully support that, because there's not going to be a computer that I can think of that's going to take over the job of an electrician or a mason or some other field along those lines. I really would encourage you to allow your kids to pursue those careers if if that's something that they're interested in. So.
We want to take a few minutes to just take any questions that people might have from the audience to our experts here. So if anybody has any question, now's the time to ask it. Yes?
For the students, how do you deal with educators that are not accepting and are not familiar with dyslexia? How do you handle that?
So let me repeat the question. The question is, how do the students, the people who are still in school, deal with educators who are not familiar with dyslexia? Or, how to deal with somebody who has dyslexia? Anybody want to answer?
So when I was here and I had dyslexia at first, it was something that was kind of embarrassing at first, and I didn't want people knowing. But then it became aware to me that it was important, because I did have a teacher who was not very nice about me getting separate time out of the class, or whenever I would get rewarded because I was doing better in classes, and definitely picked on me for it. So the important part for me was advocating for myself and making sure that I followed through and was always on point with him, and was like, well, we have an exam next week, so this is when I need a reader, and letting him know that I was completely aware and that I was not trying to use it as a crutch was a huge thing for me. And then now in college, a big thing is just making them aware, and making them realize, hey, I have this going on. They have so many students in so many different classes, so making sure they know who I am and they know what I'm doing, because then they see how responsible I'm being.
Anybody else?
So, I once had a teacher that I told them about, that they weren't giving me a certain accommodation. I can't remember what it was now. It was obviously dissolved. But I went and I kept asking them, I kept telling them I needed this accommodation and blah, 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 blah on tests, and they wouldn't give it to me still. When I was wondering if they forgot or something. So I went to them one more time, and they still didn't give it to me on the next test, so I went to Mrs. Pratt, my Pratt teacher, and I asked her if she could email them or talk to them and see if they could give me that accommodation. And that works, and pretty much you have to work with your Pratt teachers just to get the help you need. Sometimes, because sometimes they'll forget, or they need a reminder, or they really needed the accommodation to be explained or understood by someone who is a professional at it.
So I've never really had any problems with teachers not understanding, but I have had a problem with a parent. My mom is dyslexic and she gets it. My dad is not dyslexic and he is one of those really smart people, but the common sense is not always there. Now he's not here today, but I swear I would tell him not to his face. As a matter of fact, I normally tell him that once a week. I mean, it's just like how it doesn't click in my head when I read a page, it doesn't click in his head that it doesn't click in my head. No matter how many times my mom and I tell him, he's just like, I just don't get that. And I'm like, you know what? You're sending me to Bishop Walsh, you're doing your part, it's fine. But, you know, he had me throwing darts at a board at the beginning of first grade before we knew what was going on. He's like, you know, Lori, Mom. I was like, why can't you read, you know? The other two, my sister was in first grade doing fifth grade work. I mean, annoying, right? But anyway, I'm throwing darts at a word and, you know, I had to get 3 stickers. The first sticker I'd get a nickel, the second sticker I'd get a dime, and the third I'd get a quarter. I loved this game, but it didn't really help too much, so we had to quit and then go to step. I never got money, but I did get s'mores if I was good. So it was a pretty good deal. But, you know, you just have to remind them kindly that it is a thing, and you have to work really hard. You know, you have to do it for yourself, and you have to tell people because people need to be aware. It's not our fault. You know, more teachers need to be educated and need to be able to help us. And Ms. Pratt and all of her helpers have done a really great job with that.
Any other questions? Yes.
So we go to a different school. My son is in 5th grade, and we've known for a while, for many years, that like we were struggling, you know, with some different subjects. And he's so bright and so creative, and all like they were saying, like so many other strengths. And we were like, you know, why isn't he getting this? And like I said, none of the teachers that we came in contact with were really educated on dyslexia at all. And luckily, though, within the last 2 years, there was a special education teacher where he gets pulled out and gets extra help, that she's come up with some special accommodations where he has like a reading window bookmark that helps break up, you know, the paragraphs, like so they don't look so blurry or jumbled, like he can go line by line easier. We've actually never heard of a reader pen, although other than like the leapfrog, like kids learning like little pen, I've never known that there was another one that would work in class, so that's something I learned here today. But he also has had where on the computer they change the color of the screen to where it helps to where the words also don't blend together, like white on, you know, light color on white, like if you change it to a red background. I just wonder if there are any other things other than like technology that you remember from earlier in school that, you know, were things that you could use while you were studying or while you were in class that, you know, might have made things a little bit easier on you that weren't technological.
A big thing for me studying for tests was reading things aloud because when you're reading like big information out of huge textbooks to process that information, I found it very hard just to kind of like sit quietly and read because I was focusing so hard, like Jordan said, on like thinking of the correct words, and I wasn't actually processing it in my head. So what I would do is I would say it aloud multiple times, and then I would write it down until everything started to click. Because the more that I speaked it out and wrote it out, the better I understood it. And that was a big thing for me. And all around my college dorm, I had these colorful little notepads full of information to remind me of specific information so I don't forget. So definitely color coding things is a big thing that I do, especially with each subject. So all my stuff for my nutrition 430 of public nutrition, everything's blue. So then it's color coded for me. And then everything for geography is red. So then it helps me just process information better and selectivize it.
Neela, and then let's do Katie.
In 5th grade we have this trade book that we have to read like every week or something. And there's this app that I use that's called Audible, and I just like get to listen instead of read because I get kind of confused sometimes. So I just listen to it sometimes.
Katie?
Two recommendations I have are, when I was in elementary, and I still do this, but I do it with pencils now, I don't need as many fidget items. I just used to ask teachers if I could use fidget items, like a fidget cube where it had a bunch of things on it, I would spin it around in my hand during tests and stuff, kind of mess with the stuff, and it helped me focus in a lot of times, and just kind of really understand what was going on around me. It's more of a kinesthetic thing, you know, when you have to learn doing something. And another thing that my mom did with me when I was studying sometimes was she would, you know, like, you can do, if you answered like this many questions, it didn't matter if I got it right or wrong, I could do something, or like go off and do something again, like what I was doing, or, you know, let my brain recuperate from it and then come back to what I was doing. And that tended to help a lot of things.
A couple things that I've recommended to some of my patients. There's a Webster's dictionary app that you can get on your phone, but there's other, I'm sure there's other apps or other devices that you can use this. And you can type in a word that's in your story, like in your book, and you don't know how to pronounce it, and you hit the microphone, and the microphone will then pronounce the word for you, so you can learn how to pronounce that word correctly. I mean, the voice will, and then you can do the opposite. You can hit the microphone, say a word, and it will then spell it. Like if you hear a word but you don't know how to spell it, that's what you can do. One of the other complaints that my daughters had was that they didn't know how to spell a word they were always told to, or if they didn't know how a word, they were told to look it up in the dictionary. They're like, how do I know how to look up a word in the dictionary? When I think the word phone begins with the letter F, you know, they really could not stand it when the teacher would say, look something up in the dictionary. They needed to, because sometimes they really just didn't even know how to attack that word. And I wanted to also, what Neela said, I really wanted you to hear that. You need to support your kids' reading either by share reading with them or by letting them listen to books on tape or on Audible or whatever device on a Kindle. It is not taking over the reading for them. If they don't experience books on their age level, rich, you know, well-written books, their vocabulary is going to suffer. And I think Jordan spoke about that. Your vocabulary, if you're constantly reading a couple grades below level, your vocabulary and then your writing skills are going to suffer. So you need to let your kids listen to books, either that you're reading or books on a Kindle or whatever device that you're going to listen to. And Audible is one of those programs that you can download onto almost any device and listen to a lot, you know, hundreds of different books and even textbooks. So don't feel that you're giving them an excuse not to read. They need to be listening to stories and listening to books, even if they're not actually doing their reading at that point. It will come, but you don't want their vocabulary to fall way behind. So
I don't want to take up too much more time, but I think, well, Fran.
I just have one comment. I wanted to direct this at Caden. I know lots of people with dyslexia, like I know more people with dyslexia than without dyslexia. So, and all of you have been so impressive because I just thought you had so many wonderful ideas. And one of the things you said, I think, if I understood you correctly, was that you were really good at computer language and software kind of stuff. And of course, you know, Steve Jobs' name is up there, and John Chambers from Cisco, which is probably one of the biggest computer networking companies in the world, is dyslexic. And some of the schools around the country are now having kids be able to take computer language instead of foreign language in high school. And you know, foreign language is difficult because when you have trouble with sounds, you have to change all the sounds, you know, for the foreign language. So you seem very well spoken, and I'm wondering if you would consider advocating for that as an option for the kids here at Bishop Walsh. Because that, in addition to sign language, would offer other things that they could do instead of foreign language. And then it counts as a foreign language when you apply to college. So I'd love to hear your comment on that, if you'd be willing to do that.
Well, I think that is a great thing that's happening. I didn't know that was happening, and I look at the news a lot. That's but I didn't know that was happening. I think that's a great idea because I know a couple of my friends who are also dyslexic in my class. They are better with computers and all sorts of stuff than they are with a foreign language. Because one of my good friends, Isaac, he's really good with understanding other things and all sorts of stuff, but he struggles with taking Spanish as our fourth period. It's one of the extra things we do, and he struggles with it like I do. And my problem is I just don't know how to spell the words, but he struggles with it in general, just not really understanding the sounds and how it all goes together. And I think that would be a great alternative for him and for me as well, being able to have something else that we can fall back on that we understand.
Hey, Kate, you still have to learn German. You're not going to get out of that.
I know I'm not gonna get out of that.
Well, I think if you have further questions, here are the experts, and you're more than welcome to come up and talk to them after the fact. I think we want to wrap things up. We have some delicious things back here. Please help yourself. And Steph, I think, is going to wrap things up for us.
We did have one more bonus question, but before we do the big reveal, I want to thank these guys. I forget how much they struggle and how hard they work, because when they walk into my room, I heard it, I don't know, Jordan or somebody say, she makes you think you're smart. I know they're smart. I don't make them think they're smart. When they walk in my room, I know they're smart, and that's just how I see them. So I forget the other side, and it was very humbling for me to hear that, and they were all very modest. Like, Al won't tell you about what a fabulous photographer he is, but look him up on Facebook. It's amazing. It's amazing. Neela won't tell you that the teachers have said, are you sure she needs help? Because she's such a good reader, and how kind she is to everybody. And way back when Roman said he was going to do his research paper on cybersecurity, which wasn't a thing then, and 15-year-old Roman saying, you watch, like the Russians are going to hack into our elections. I'm not kidding you. He told me that when he was 15. And he also won't tell you how successful his creepy exotic reptile business is. I mean, he's adding employees. Amazing, 40% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic. Caden just is the go-to guy in the school. If your computer is broken, you just call Caden and he can fix it. And Jordan will advocate for anybody about anything. She wasn't kidding when she said give you a name. Okay? That girl will stand up for what is right regardless. And Marley put advocacy on the board here at Bishop Walsh. Marley showed people how it was done. And you're right, not everybody appreciated you, but you set the standard for, and she was always very respectful, but my goodness, she got what she needed. And Sarah Ford had the funniest words I have ever, she could have her own dictionary, ginormous and dramatic. And what Sue won't tell you is that Sarah was just voted one of the 40 under 40 rising stars in North Alexandria, which is amazing. So they're amazing people, and I'm honored to know them. So the big reveal, our bonus, what does every student need to be a successful early reader is something called structured literacy. So if you don't go to this school, you might want to look up what is structured literacy, research that, see what your child's literacy program is, and you may want to advocate for structured literacy, especially for the early ones. And at Bishop Walsh School, every elementary teacher and Al had a 60-hour training in Orton, Gillingham this summer. So they are all, and we are now using structured literacy reading program through Open for all of our kindergarten through third grade students. So I'm super excited and proud about that. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I especially, she won't want me to do this, but I want to recognize my very good friend and mentor and teacher, Fran Bauman, who is Dr. Fran Bauman, who is a consultant to our program and who is a dyslexia warrior like nobody I have ever seen. So thank you, Fran. She surprised me by driving up from Baltimore.